My name is Sophia Mitchell, and I am 32 years old. I built a hotel empire from nothing after my family laughed at my dreams for years. Today, I stood in the lobby of my newest acquisition, watching my father demand to speak to the owner after being denied a free upgrade. The shock on his face when I stepped forward was worth every sleepless night and rejection letter I ever endured. They had no idea that the hotel they were trying to bully their way through belonged to the daughter they never believed in. Before I tell you how this moment unfolded, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit that like button and subscribe if you have ever had to prove someone wrong who underestimated you. I grew up in a modest split-level house on Maple Street in coastal Maine. Our town, Harborview, was small enough that everyone knew everyone, but large enough to attract summer tourists who wanted the authentic New England experience without the crowds of more famous destinations. My father, Robert Mitchell, worked as the general manager at the Harborview Inn, the only decent hotel in town. From the outside, it looked like he had a respectable career, but inside our home, the story was different. Dad came home most nights complaining about guests, staff, or the owner. He carried a perpetual chip on his shoulder about not being an owner himself. My mother, Diane, would listen patiently, offering sympathetic nods while preparing dinner or folding laundry. Mom had given up her own career as a teacher to raise us and support Dad's ambitions, something I didn't fully understand until I was much older. My older brother James was Dad's pride and joy. For years older than me, James had the confidence that came from being the firstborn son of a man who valued traditional family hierarchy. James played football, got decent grades, and shared Dad's practical, no-nonsense outlook on life. When James spoke, Dad listened. When James had ideas, Dad considered them seriously. My younger sister Ashley was 2 years behind me. Pretty and sociable, she learned early to navigate family dynamics by aligning herself with whoever held power. Usually, that meant agreeing with James and Dad, forming a 3-person alliance that often left Mom and me outnumbered in family decisions. And then there was me, the middle child, always a bit out of step with everyone else. From the age of 9, I was fascinated by hotels. It started during a rare family vacation to Boston. While my siblings complained about sharing a room, I was entranced by everything about the hotel we stayed in. I noticed how the front desk staff remembered guests' names, how the housekeeping carts were organized, how the breakfast buffet was arranged for maximum efficiency. I bombarded the concierge with questions until Dad pulled me away, embarrassed by my curiosity. When we returned home, I started creating my own hotel designs and notebooks, imagining spaces that would make guests feel both special and comfortable. I would rearrange my bedroom furniture constantly, trying to maximize the flow and functionality of the space. For my 12th birthday, I asked for a label maker so I could organize my belongings the way hotel staff organized supplies. Dad thought my interest was cute at first, in a dismissive way. But as I grew older and continued to talk about hotels and hospitality, his amusement turned to irritation. During dinner one night when I was 14, I excitedly shared an idea about hotels offering personalized welcome packages for guests based on the purpose of their trip. Dad scoffed. "You think hotels can afford to give away free stuff to every guest? This is why you'll never make it in this business. It's about the bottom line, not fairy tale experiences." James snickered. "Yeah, Soph, in the real world businesses need to make money." Ashley, always quick to follow their lead, added, "Not everyone can be as fancy as Sophia wants to be." Mom offered a week. "You have such a creative mind, honey," but her defense was drowned out by Dad's continued lecture about profit margins and occupancy rates. This became the pattern of our family interactions. I would share an idea or dream, and Dad would shoot it down, usually with James as his backup. Mom would offer token support, but never enough to actually stand against Dad. Ashley would observe carefully and then pick the winning side. Despite this, or perhaps because of it, my determination only grew stronger. I worked harder at school, knowing education would be my ticket out. I started babysitting at 12, pet sitting at 13, and by 16, I convinced the owner of a small bed and breakfast in town to hire me for weekend cleaning shifts. I saved every dollar, hiding my money in a locked box at the back of my closet. I knew I would need it. When I was accepted to Cornell University with a partial scholarship to study hotel administration, Dad was unimpressed. Universities don't teach you what really matters in running a hotel. You're wasting your time and money on fancy theories. When I pointed out that his boss, the owner of the Harborview Inn, had the same degree, he dismissed it. He was born rich. His family had connections. You don't. The scholarship covered about half of my tuition, but my parents refused to help with the rest, insisting they needed to save for James Law School and Ashley's future college expenses. I didn't argue. The night before I left for college, I emptied my savings box, combined it with a student loan, and promised myself I would find a way to make it work. For the next 4 years, I lived on ramen noodles and coffee, worked 2 part-time jobs, and still managed to graduate with honors. I invited my family to my graduation ceremony. Dad and James claimed they were too busy. Mom and Ashley came, but spent most of the time talking about Ashley's upcoming senior prom. When my name was called and I crossed the stage, I heard Mom clap, but when I looked into the audience afterward, they had already left to catch an earlier flight home. That night, surrounded by classmates celebrating with proud families, I sat alone in my nearly empty apartment and made a promise to myself. I would build something so undeniably successful that even my family couldn't diminish it. And I would do it completely on my own. With my degree in hand and determination in my heart, I moved to Boston and took an entry-level position at the front desk of a mid-sized chain hotel. The pay was barely enough to cover my tiny studio apartment and student loan payments, so I picked up a second job waiting tables at night. For 18 months, I worked double shifts, studied hotel management journals in my scarce free time, and observed everything I could about how successful hotels operated. My break came when I was promoted to assistant manager at a struggling boutique hotel called the Harrington. The property had charm and history, but was hemorrhaging money due to poor management and outdated systems. The owners, an elderly couple who had inherited the business from family, were considering selling at a loss. I saw an opportunity to prove myself. With nothing to lose, I approached the owners with a detailed proposal for turning the hotel around. They were skeptical, but desperate enough to give me 3 months to implement my ideas before making a final decision about selling. I completely revamped the hotel's online presence, personally responding to every negative review with solutions. I trained the staff to collect and use guest preference data to create personalized experiences. I reallocated the limited renovation budget to focus on key first impression areas like the lobby and bathrooms rather than spreading it thin across the entire property. I introduced a local artisan breakfast program that cost less than the previous buffet but created a unique selling point we could promote. Within 2 months, occupancy rates increased by 30%. By the end of the 3-month trial, we were operating at a modest profit for the first time in years. The owners were amazed and offered me a permanent position as general manager with a significant raise and small percentage of profits. It was during this turnaround project that I met Natalie Williams. Natalie was a 60-year-old hotel executive who had risen through the ranks when women in upper management were rare in the industry. She came to stay at the Harrington while visiting her grandchildren in Boston and was impressed by the personal welcome note and local guidebook specifically curated for grandparents that I had arranged for her room. She asked to meet the manager responsible, and we ended up talking for hours about the hospitality industry. Natalie became my mentor, offering advice on career moves and introducing me to her extensive network of industry contacts. She saw something in me that reminded her of herself, she said, a hunger to prove myself and an instinctive understanding of what makes a great guest experience. Over the next 3 years, I strategically moved through positions at increasingly prestigious properties, building my reputation and refining my management philosophy. I lived frugally, saving as much as possible while also working to build excellent credit. I maintained minimal contact with my family during this time, sending birthday cards and calling on major holidays, but our conversations remained superficial. I was 28 when Natalie called me about a small 20-room inn outside of Providence, Rhode Island that was going into foreclosure. The property had good bones, but had been mismanaged for years. The bank was eager to sell, and the asking price was surprisingly within reach if I leveraged everything I had saved and qualified for a small business loan. It was terrifying to consider. I would be putting every cent I had worked for at risk. But when I walked through the property, I could see exactly what it could become with the right vision and hard work. With Natalie guidance, I secured financing, and 2 months later, I became the proud, terrified owner of what would become the first Monarch hospitality property. I lived in one of the hotel rooms for the first year, pouring every dollar back into renovations. I did much of the cosmetic work myself, painting walls late at night after handling the front desk all day. I hired staff carefully, looking for people who shared my vision for personalized service. I implemented technology systems that would allow us to track guest preferences without being intrusive. I formed partnerships with local businesses to create unique experiences for guests. Slowly, the property transformed. Reviews began to improve. Repeat bookings increased. Local media covered our unique approach as a fresh addition to the area's hospitality options. By the end of the first year, we were operating at a sustainable profit. I named the hotel the Chrysalis Inn, symbolic of the transformation from caterpillar to butterfly. The butterfly motif became subtle branding throughout the property, from the logo to small butterfly design elements in the wallpaper and fixtures. Little did I know then that this would become the foundation for what would eventually be known as the Monarch Hospitality brand. When the hotel had been successfully operating for 18 months, I decided it was time to share my achievement with my family. I hadn't seen them in person for over 2 years at this point. I sent formal invitations to a small opening celebration for the rebranded property, booking and paying for their travel arrangements in advance so there could be no financial excuses. I was nervous but excited as I prepared for their arrival. Part of me still hoped that seeing my success firsthand would finally earn their approval. The naive part of me that never quite gave up on the dream of family support was about to get a harsh reality check. The grand reopening weekend of the Chrysalis Inn should have been one of the proudest moments of my life. I had transformed a failing property into a charming, profitable boutique hotel with glowing reviews and a growing list of repeat guests. I had done exactly what my father had always said I couldn't do. They arrived late Friday afternoon. Dad immediately complained about the 2-hour drive from the airport, though I had offered to arrange a car service, which he declined. Mom complimented the lobby decor, but in the same breath mentioned that the color scheme would show dirt easily, a practical concern I should have considered. James asked about the profit margins within the first 10 minutes of arrival, skeptical when I explained our current numbers and growth projections. I gave them a tour of the property, pointing out the thoughtful details I had incorporated: the locally sourced bathroom amenities, the custom blend coffee program, the handcrafted furniture from Rhode Island artisans. Ashley seemed momentarily impressed by the Instagram-worthy breakfast presentation, until James made a comment about it seeming unnecessarily fancy, at which point she quickly agreed with him. The moment that truly crushed me came at dinner that night. I had arranged a private meal with a local chef in our small event space, featuring regional specialties and wine pairings. I was explaining my vision for expanding the experiential aspects of the hotel when Dad interrupted. "Looks like you got lucky with this place, Sophia. Property values in this area have been rising, and the tourism board has been pushing the region pretty hard. I wouldn't count on this level of success continuing once the novelty wears off or if the economy takes a downturn." I felt like I'd been slapped. Lucky? I had worked 16-hour days for years. ID researched the area extensively before purchasing, including growth projections and economic stability factors. ID created detailed business plans and contingency strategies. Luck had nothing to do with it. Mom must have seen something in my expression because she quickly jumped in with, "What your father means is that it's wonderful you've done so well, but it's smart to be cautious. We just don't want to see you disappointed if things change." James raised his glass in a mock toast. "To Sophia, lucky break. Enjoy it while it lasts, sis." Ashley giggled and clinked her glass against his. I excused myself to check on a kitchen issue and spent 5 minutes in the storage closet, breathing deeply and blinking back tears. When I returned, I was professional and composed, steering the conversation to neutral topics for the remainder of the evening. They left Sunday morning, earlier than planned, because James suddenly remembered an important meeting on Monday he needed to prepare for. The parting was awkward, with vague promises to visit again soon that we all knew were empty. After they left, I sat alone in my office, surrounded by the carefully crafted business plans, positive reviews, and growth projections that my family hadn't bothered to take seriously. Something hardened in me that day. The last lingering hope that I could win my family's approval finally died, and in its place grew a steely determination. If they couldn't see my worth now, I would build something so undeniably successful that the entire industry would recognize it, whether my family did or not. For the next 5 years, I poured everything into expanding Monarch Hospitality. I used the profits and additional financing to acquire a second struggling property in Newport, Rhode Island, applying the same transformation formula with some refinements based on what I had learned. When that succeeded, I expanded to a third location in the Berkshires of Massachusetts. Each property followed the same core philosophy: personalized service, local partnerships, and thoughtful details that made guests feel special without ostentation. Each incorporated subtle butterfly motifs in the design and was named after types of butterflies or stages in their development. I was building not just hotels, but a recognizable brand with loyal customers who sought out Monarch properties specifically. I maintained minimal contact with my family during this time. Christmas cards, occasional texts, and rare, brief phone calls on major holidays. They knew I was continuing in the hotel business, but showed little interest in the details. I stopped offering information about my expanding company, and they rarely asked. By the time I was 31, Monarch Hospitality had grown to 15 properties across New England and the upper mid-Atlantic states. We had won regional hospitality awards, been featured in travel magazines, and developed a loyal customer base who appreciated our attention to detail and personalized approach to service. It was then that an unexpected opportunity arose. Pembroke Hotels, a historic chain with 20 properties primarily in the Northeast, was struggling financially after a series of poor management decisions. The once prestigious brand had fallen into disrepair and disrepute. Their properties were in prime locations, but needed significant renovation and a complete service culture overhaul. After months of negotiations and securing additional investment partners, including Natalie, who had become not just a mentor, but a friend and supporter, I acquired Pembroke Hotels in a deal that made regional business news. Overnight, Monarch Hospitality more than doubled in size and expanded into several major metropolitan markets. The business challenge was immense, integrating two different company cultures, beginning the long process of renovating the Pembroke properties to Monarch standards and retraining staff in our service philosophy. I barely slept for months, traveling constantly between properties, leading training sessions, overseeing renovations, and reassuring nervous employees about the transition. Among the acquired Pembroke properties was the Harborview Inn in my hometown, the very hotel where my father had worked for decades. He had left the position 3 years earlier, taking early retirement when new ownership, pre my acquisition, had begun making changes he disagreed with. I had known the hotel was part of the Pembroke portfolio, of course, but it wasn't the reason for the acquisition. Still, there was an undeniable symmetry to now owning the property where I had first become fascinated with the hospitality industry. I had been so consumed with the acquisition and integration that I hadn't given much thought to the Harborview property specifically. It was one of the smaller hotels in the portfolio and not in a major market, so it wasn't a top priority for immediate renovation. I had assigned a regional manager to oversee it along with 3 other New England properties and trusted them to maintain our standards until we could implement a full Monarch transformation. It was pure coincidence when, scrolling through social media late one night between property visits, I saw a post from my sister Ashley. Looking forward to the big family reunion next month at the Harborview Inn. The whole Mitchell clan together again for Mom's 60th. I stared at the screen, momentarily confused. My mother's birthday was indeed next month, but no one had mentioned a family reunion to me, much less one at what was now my hotel. There were dozens of comments from extended family members confirming their attendance, discussing travel plans, and reminiscing about past family gatherings. My name wasn't mentioned once. I had been explicitly excluded from my own mother's birthday celebration, which was being held in a hotel that I now owned. The irony was almost too perfect. I put down my phone and walked to the window of my hotel suite in Chicago, looking out at the city lights. I should have felt hurt, and part of me did. But mostly, I felt a strange sense of clarity. This was an opportunity, though I wasn't yet sure for what. I picked up my phone again and called my assistant. We needed to make some changes to my schedule for next month. I would be personally overseeing some renovations at our Harborview property. The coastal air felt different somehow as I drove my rental car into Harborview for the first time in nearly a decade. The town had changed subtly. Tourism had clearly increased, with new shops and restaurants along the main street, but the essential character remained. I could still navigate the streets from muscle memory, turning automatically toward the harbor where the Harborview Inn stood overlooking the water. The hotel itself had undergone some of the initial Monarch upgrades over the past few months. The exterior had been repainted in our signature navy and cream color scheme, and subtle butterfly motifs had been incorporated into the signage. Inside, the lobby had been completely renovated with the warm, welcoming aesthetic that characterized all Monarch properties, with natural materials, comfortable seating areas, and local artwork. I had arrived 3 days before the scheduled family reunion, giving myself time to prepare mentally and ensure the property was running smoothly. The staff had been told that the owner of Monarch would be visiting for a property inspection, but I had instructed the regional manager not to make a big announcement about my personal connection to the town. I wanted to observe operations as naturally as possible. I checked in under the name Sophie Mills, a slight variation of my name that would allow me to move through the hotel without immediate recognition. The front desk staff was professional and welcoming, following the Monarch service standards well. My room was on the 3rd floor, a standard king with a partial ocean view. I hadn't booked the best room intentionally. I wanted to experience the hotel as a typical guest would. For the first 2 days, I immersed myself in the hotel operations, sitting in on staff meetings, reviewing renovation plans for the next phase, and quietly observing guest interactions. I had dinner in the hotel restaurant both nights, taking notes on the service and food quality. The staff was performing well overall, though I noted a few opportunities for improved efficiency and guest experience enhancement. By the 3rd day, I was satisfied that the hotel was representing the Monarch brand adequately, though not yet at the level of our flagship properties. That afternoon, I sat in a corner of the lobby with my laptop, ostensibly working, but actually watching as the first members of my extended family began to arrive for the reunion. First came my mother's sister, Aunt Paula, and her husband, followed by cousins from my father's side with their children in tow. They checked in without incident, exclaiming over the hotel's recent renovations. No one gave me a second glance, which wasn't surprising. I had changed significantly over the years, wearing my hair differently and dressing in the polished business attire that had become my uniform rather than the casual clothes they would remember. As evening approached, more family arrived, including my parents, James, his wife Melissa, and Ashley with her boyfriend. I watched from behind my laptop screen as they entered the lobby, my father immediately assessing the space with a critical eye. I could read his body language even from a distance, the slight frown, the way he scanned the room looking for flaws. Some things never changed. After they checked in and disappeared to their rooms, I retreated to my own suite to prepare for the inevitable encounter. I changed into a simple but elegant black dress, applied minimal makeup, and steeled myself for what was to come. I had no concrete plan, preferring to let the situation unfold organically, but I was determined to maintain my composure regardless of what happened. I returned to the lobby around 7, when I knew most of the family would be gathering before dinner. I positioned myself at the small hotel bar, nursing a sparkling water and watching as my extended family reunited with hugs and laughter. No one approached me or seemed to recognize me, which was both a relief and strangely painful. The group grew louder as more people arrived and drinks were served. I observed my mother accepting birthday wishes and gifts, looking older than I remembered, but smiling genuinely. My father held court with his brothers, gesturing emphatically as he always did when sharing his opinions. James and Ashley moved between groups, playing the role of gracious hosts despite not actually hosting anything. It was when the group attempted to move from the lobby to the hotel's restaurant for their reservation that the situation shifted. The restaurant manager approached politely, explaining that while they could accommodate the party of 20, the private dining room they had requested was not available as it had not been reserved in advance. My father stepped forward, his voice carrying across the lobby. But we specifically asked for the private room when we made the reservation. We have family coming from all over for this special occasion. The manager checked his tablet. I'm sorry, sir, but there's no note about a private room in the reservation. We can seat you in the main dining room, but the private space is already booked for another event. This is unacceptable, my father said, his voice rising. Who runs this place now anyway? The service has gone downhill since I worked here. I want to speak to the manager. I am the manager, sir, came the patient reply. Then I want to speak to the owner, my father demanded. I used to be the general manager here for 20 years. I know the owner would want to accommodate a loyal former employee. This was the moment. I took a deep breath, set down my glass, and walked calmly toward the growing scene. I nodded to the restaurant manager, who looked confused, but stepped aside. Is there a problem here? I asked, my voice steady despite my pounding heart. My father barely glanced at me. This doesn't concern you, miss. I'm trying to resolve an issue with the management. Dad, James said suddenly, his eyes widening as he looked at me more closely. I think that's... Sophia? My mother gasped, finally turning her full attention to me. The lobby seemed to fall silent as all eyes turned in my direction. I smiled, the professional smile I had perfected over years of handling difficult situations in my hotels. Hello, everyone. It's been a while. My father stared, his expression shifting from confusion to shock. Sophia? What are you doing here? Well, as you were just saying, Dad, you wanted to speak to the owner. I swept my arm in a small gesture. So here I am. The owner? James repeated, looking between me and our father. What are you talking about? Monarch Hospitality acquired the Pembroke Hotel chain last year, I explained calmly. That includes the Harborview Inn. I'm sorry about the confusion with the private dining room. I didn't realize this reservation was for my family, or I would have made sure everything was arranged properly. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. You own this hotel? But how? Not just this hotel, Mom. The entire chain. The silence that followed was profound, broken only when a distant cousin whispered loudly, I thought she just managed a small inn somewhere. I turned to the restaurant manager. Jonathan, please prepare the butterfly room for my family. Move the tech conference breakfast setup to the Harborview room. Instead, they're a smaller group, and I think they'll appreciate the better view. Right away, Ms. Mitchell, he replied, professionally hiding any surprise he might have felt at the revelation. I turned back to my stunned family. The room will be ready in about 20 minutes. In the meantime, perhaps you'd all like to join me in the bar for a complimentary round of drinks? As the extended family moved somewhat awkwardly toward the bar, muttering in confusion and surprise, I gestured to my immediate family. Perhaps the 5 of us could have a quick word in the library first? Without waiting for a response, I led the way to the small, elegant library room off the main lobby. As I had hoped, my parents, James and Ashley followed, their shock apparently overriding any potential refusal. As the door closed behind us, the facade I had carefully maintained began to feel heavy. I was standing in a room with the people who should have been closest to me, but who felt like strangers. People who had planned a family gathering and explicitly excluded me, not knowing they were doing so in my own hotel. The irony was almost too perfect. What followed would either be a long overdue confrontation or the beginning of a new understanding. Either way, there was no turning back now. The library door clicked shut behind Ashley, the last to enter. The room, with its built-in bookshelves, leather armchairs, and subtle nautical touches, was designed to be a comfortable retreat for hotel guests. Now it felt like a stage set for a play we'd all been rehearsing for years without ever performing. I gestured to the seating area. Please sit down. My father remained standing, arms crossed. How long have you owned this place? The Harborview specifically? About 8 months. But Monarch Hospitality now owns 35 properties across the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. 35 hotels? James couldn't keep the shock from his voice as he sank into an armchair. My mother perched on the edge of a leather sofa, her birthday corsage slightly askew. Why didn't you tell us? I tilted my head slightly. Why didn't you invite me to Mom's birthday celebration? The question hung in the air. My mother looked away. Ashley suddenly became very interested in her manicure, and James cleared his throat uncomfortably. My father, predictably, went on the offensive. Don't turn this around, Sophia. You've barely kept in touch for years. We didn't even know if you'd want to come. So you decided for me by not extending an invitation at all? We didn't think you'd be able to get away from work, Ashley offered weakly. You always say you're so busy when we talk. When we talk. I raised an eyebrow. The 10-minute phone calls twice a year where none of you ask any questions about my life or business. My mother finally met my eyes. We're very proud of what you've accomplished, Sophia. I had no idea it was on this scale, but we've always supported your career. I couldn't help the short laugh that escaped me. Always supported me? Mom, do you remember when I got accepted to Cornell? Dad said I was wasting my time and money. You refused to help with tuition while paying for James' law school and promising the same for Ashley. That was different, my father interjected. James was studying something practical. Hotel management is something you learn on the job, not in some ivory tower. Obviously, I was right about that part you got where you were through practical experience, just like I said. I stared at him, momentarily speechless at his ability to rewrite history to fit his narrative. Did you miss the part where I graduated with honors from one of the top hospitality programs in the country? That education was the foundation for everything I've built. Let's not argue about ancient history, James said smoothly, his lawyer instincts kicking in. The important thing is that we're all together now, and clearly we've got a lot to celebrate. Sophia's success, Mom's birthday, it's a family reunion in the truest sense. I recognize the tactic diversion, moving to positive ground, avoiding accountability. It might work in a courtroom, but not with me. It's interesting that you're suddenly interested in celebrating my success, James. The last time I shared an achievement with this family was when I opened my first hotel. Dad said I got lucky. You toasted to my lucky break that would probably fail, and then you all left early. James had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. I was just giving you a hard time. That's what brothers do. No, James. Brothers support their sisters. Brothers defend their sisters when their fathers tear down their dreams. Brothers show up for graduations and business openings. That's what brothers do. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. We've made mistakes, Sophia. We're not perfect parents. But we love you. We always have. I believe that you love me, Mom. I softened my tone slightly. But you never stood up for me. Not once when Dad or James dismissed my goals or belittled my achievements. My father scoffed. So that's what this is about? Poor Sophia didn't get enough praise and validation? You've orchestrated this whole ambush to make us feel guilty? I took a deep breath, refusing to rise to his bait. This wasn't an ambush, Dad. I came to inspect one of my properties, which happens to be in my hometown. You planned a family gathering at my hotel without inviting me. If anyone's been ambushed here, it's me. Ashley, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. I remember when we were kids, you used to rearrange your bedroom furniture constantly. Mom would get so annoyed because you'd scratch the hardwood floors. She leaned forward. You were practicing, weren't you? For this? The unexpected observation, so simple yet accurate, momentarily threw me off balance. Yes, I suppose I was. A brief silence fell, broken when my father shook his head. Well, congratulations on your success, Sophia. I suppose you learned something from watching me all those years. Hotel management is in your blood, after all. And there it was, the attempt to take credit, to position himself as the source of my success rather than the obstacle I had overcome. I had anticipated this exact response. What I learned from watching you, Dad, was what not to do. I built Monarch on principles that are the opposite of how you managed. You ruled by intimidation. I lead through empowerment. You focused on cutting costs. I invest in experiences. You saw guests as demanding inconveniences. I see them as the reason we exist. My father's face flushed red. Now wait just a minute. But I wasn't finished. Every single thing you've dismissed as unnecessary or frivolous in the hospitality industry, personalized service, attention to detail, employee satisfaction programs, these are exactly what have made Monarch successful. I built this company by doing everything you said wouldn't work. James leaned forward, his expression suddenly thoughtful. How much is Monarch worth now? Of course, that would be his question. Always the bottom line with James. That's not something I discuss casually, even with family. Especially with family. Come on, Soph, he cajoled, using the childhood nickname I had always hated. We're talking about potentially significant family assets here. My success is not a family asset, James. Monarch Hospitality is my company, built with my work, my vision, and my risk-taking. The only people who share in its success are those who supported its creation: my investors, my dedicated employees, and my mentors. So that's it? Ashley said, her voice rising. You've made it big and now you're too good for your family? Is that why you're doing this, making us look stupid in front of everyone, showing off how successful you've become without us? I looked at my sister, seeing the insecurity beneath her defensive anger. I didn't invite 24 extended family members to a celebration at my hotel without including me. That's what you've done, not me. I'm simply here doing my job. My mother reached for my hand, which I allowed after a moment's hesitation. Sophia, please. It's my 60th birthday. Can't we put aside these old hurts for one weekend and try to be a family again? Her plea was sincere, I could see that. And perhaps in another life, I might have yielded, might have pushed down my feelings yet again for the sake of family harmony. But I had spent too many years working on my self-worth to compromise it now. I want you to enjoy your birthday, Mom. The private dining room will be ready for your celebration, and everything will be taken care of. I won't disrupt your plans. But I won't pretend that everything is fine between us when it isn't. My father, who had been silently seething, finally exploded. This is ridiculous. You show up out of nowhere, throw your success in our faces, and then play the victim? If this is how you've chosen to run your life, cutting off your family, holding grudges, you're going to end up alone, Sophia. All the hotels in the world won't keep you warm at night. I met his gaze steadily. I'd rather be alone than surrounded by people who can't celebrate my success without trying to claim it or diminish it. My father grabbed my mother's arm. Come on, Diane. We're leaving. I won't stay in this hotel another minute. Robert, my mother protested weakly. It's my birthday weekend. Everyone's here. We can move to another hotel. One not owned by your ungrateful daughter. James stood up, always quick to follow our father's lead. Dad's right. This is too awkward now. My mother looked torn, her eyes moving between my father and me. Ashley hesitated, then said, What about all the arrangements? The cake, the dinner reservations? My father was already heading for the door. Well, figure it out. I'm not spending another minute being made to feel like a villain in my own family. As he reached for the door handle, I spoke one last time. The private room is still yours if you want it, Mom. Happy birthday. My father yanked open the door and stormed out. After a moment's hesitation, James followed. Ashley gave me a long, unreadable look before taking my mother's arm and gently leading her out. At the threshold, my mother turned back. I'm sorry, Sophia, she said softly. For everything. Then they were gone, leaving me alone in the quiet library, surrounded by books filled with stories that probably made more sense than my own family drama. I sat down in one of the leather chairs, feeling strangely empty. This confrontation had been building for years, yet now that it had happened, I didn't feel the catharsis I had expected. Just a hollow sadness for what should have been, what could have been, if only my family had been different. I gave myself 5 minutes to sit with these feelings, then straightened my shoulders and stood up. I had a hotel to run, guests to take care of, and staff who were undoubtedly confused by the unfolding drama. Whatever happened next with my family, I had responsibilities that wouldn't wait. As I reached for the door, I caught a glimpse of myself in the small mirror on the wall, sturdy, composed, resilient. Whatever storm was coming next, I was ready for it. I had just finished explaining the situation to the restaurant manager when the commotion erupted at the front desk. My father's voice carried across the lobby, loud and indignant. "What do you mean my card is declined? Try it again. This is ridiculous." I moved closer, observing the scene while staying partially hidden behind a decorative column. The front desk clerk, a young woman named Tara who had impressed me with her professionalism during my stay, maintained her composure admirably. "I'm sorry, sir. I've tried both cards twice. Perhaps you could try calling your bank?" My mother stood beside my father, her face flushed with embarrassment. Behind them, James was frantically checking his own wallet while Ashley whispered urgently to her boyfriend. I knew exactly what had happened. My father had just tried to check out and move to another hotel, only to discover that his credit cards were at their limit. James was likely in a similar situation given the way he was now arguing with Melissa in hushed tones. I hadn't planned this moment, hadn't orchestrated their financial embarrassment. But watching it unfold, I realized it created an opportunity for clarity that might not come again. My father was now demanding to speak to a manager again, his voice rising. The other guests in the lobby were beginning to stare. Some of our extended family members had gathered as well, looking confused and uncomfortable. I stepped forward. "Is there a problem here?" My father turned, his face reddening further when he saw me. "Your staff is incompetent. My cards are working fine, they must have entered something wrong." I nodded to Tara. "Let me handle this." She looked relieved as she stepped aside. "Dad," I said quietly, causing him to bristle at the public use of the term. "If you'd like to discuss this privately, we can go to my office." "There's nothing to discuss. We're leaving this hotel immediately." I kept my voice calm and professional. "It appears there's an issue with your payment method. Perhaps we could try another card?" "I told you, there's nothing wrong with my cards." "This is your doing, isn't it?" he accused, lowering his voice but increasing its intensity. "You've somehow flagged our cards just to humiliate us." The accusation was so absurd that I almost laughed. Why would I sabotage my own hotel's payment system? That would be terrible business practice. Behind him, I could see James and Melissa still arguing. From what I could overhear, their cards were maxed out from recent home renovations. Ashley and her boyfriend seemed to be having a similar conversation about their financial situation. My mother stepped forward, her eyes pleading. "Sophia, please. This is so embarrassing." I made a decision. "Mom, Dad, why don't you all come to my office for a moment?" I looked at the gathering crowd of extended family. "The rest of you, please enjoy complimentary coffee and pastries in the garden terrace while we sort this out." I led my immediate family to the small but elegant office I had been using during my stay. Once inside, I closed the door and turned to face them. "This is exactly what I'm talking about," my father began immediately. "Using your position to manipulate and control us." "Dad," I sighed, "this has nothing to do with me. Credit cards get declined for many reasons. It happens to guests every day at every hotel in the world." "So you're saying it's just a coincidence that all our cards stopped working right after our conversation?" James challenged. "Yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. I have neither the desire nor the ability to interfere with your personal banking. Though I am curious why none of you have available credit for a single hotel night." My mother sank into a chair, looking exhausted. "Robert's been retired for 3 years, and his pension isn't what we expected. James has been helping us with some expenses, but with his kids' college tuition." She trailed off, and I suddenly saw my family in a new light. My father, proud and stubborn, hiding financial struggles behind bluster and criticism. James, the successful lawyer whose lifestyle was probably leveraged to the hilt. Ashley, always following their lead, but clearly not financially independent either. For years, ID assumed they were doing fine without me. Better than fine. ID pictured them living comfortable lives, occasionally remembering to feel slightly bad about not supporting my dreams. It had never occurred to me that they might be struggling while I thrived. The realization didn't erase the years of hurt, but it shifted something in my perspective. I turned to my father. "You have 2 options. You can stay here as my guests for the duration of Mom's birthday weekend. The rooms, food, and amenities will be covered. Or you can leave and make other arrangements. So now you're offering charity? He scoffed, but I could see the conflict in his eyes, pride warring with practicality. It's not charity, Dad. It's business. Having my family cause a scene in the lobby of my hotel is bad for the Monarch brand. This is the most efficient solution. I knew he would respond better to this framing than to compassion, and I was right. He seemed to consider it, his business mind engaging despite his anger. And what are the conditions of this arrangement? He asked suspiciously. Just one. You treat my staff with respect. Every single person working in this hotel, from the housekeepers to the managers. No yelling, no demands for special treatment, no pulling the "I'm the owner's" family card. My father started to object, but my mother cut him off. That's completely reasonable, Robert. She turned to me. Thank you, Sophia. This is very generous. James looked torn between relief and resentment. This doesn't change anything, you know. You can't buy your way back into the family with free hotel stays. I met his gaze steadily. I'm not trying to buy my way into anywhere, James. I'm offering a practical solution to an immediate problem. What happens with our family long-term is a much more complicated conversation that can't be solved in a weekend. Ashley, who had been unusually quiet, suddenly spoke up. I think we should stay. She looked at our father. Dad, it's Mom's birthday. Everyone's already here. And she hesitated, then continued with surprising candor. And maybe we need to admit that Sophia has built something impressive here. Something none of the rest of us could have done. My father's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, there was a knock at the door. Come in, I called. Jonathan, the restaurant manager, poked his head in. MS. Mitchell, the butterfly room is ready for your family whenever they're ready. And the birthday cake you ordered has arrived. My mother looked at me in surprise. You ordered a birthday cake? I nodded. Yesterday, when I confirmed the private dining room, I assumed you'd still want to celebrate, regardless of other circumstances. This small gesture seemed to affect my mother more deeply than anything else that had happened. Tears welled in her eyes. You've always been thoughtful that way. Even as a little girl, you noticed details the rest of us missed. My father looked between my mother and me, then sighed heavily, the fight seeming to drain out of him somewhat. Well, stay. For your mother's sake. He looked at me directly. But don't think this means I approve of how you've handled things. I held his gaze. I stopped seeking your approval a long time ago, Dad. The words weren't meant to hurt, just to state a truth that needed to be acknowledged. Nevertheless, I saw something flicker in his eyes, something that might have been pain, or perhaps just recognition. My mother stood up, smoothing her dress with shaky hands. We should get back to the others. They'll be wondering what's happening. As they moved toward the door, my father paused. The hotel's different now. Better. I'll give you that much. It was as close to a compliment as he had ever given me about my professional life. I nodded, accepting it for what it was, a small crack in a very thick wall. Ashley lingered after the others had left. It's not just Dad, you know. We've all been jealous. Watching your success from a distance while pretending it didn't matter. Her honesty surprised me. Thanks for admitting that. She shrugged. Doesn't change anything, does it? I considered her question seriously. Maybe not. Or maybe acknowledging the truth is the first step to changing things. I'm not sure yet. She nodded, then followed our parents and James out the door. I remained in the office for a few minutes, processing what had just happened. My family would stay, but under my terms. The power dynamic had shifted irrevocably. What remained to be seen was whether this new dynamic could support something healthier than what we had before, or if it would simply be a different kind of dysfunction. As I prepared to return to the lobby, my phone buzzed with a text from Natalie. How's the hometown visit going? I smiled slightly as I typed my response. Complicated. Tell you all about it later. Then I squared my shoulders and headed out to ensure that, whatever else happened this weekend, my mother would have a birthday celebration worth remembering. The rest of the weekend passed in a strange limbo between tension and tentative connection. My father maintained a stiff politeness that was worlds away from genuine reconciliation, but equally distant from his earlier fury. James oscillated between professional interest in my business success and defensive justifications of his own career choices. Ashley seemed the most genuinely reflective, watching me with curious eyes as I moved through the hotel, interacting with staff and handling small issues that arose. My mother tried desperately to bridge the gaps, alternating between tearful apologies for the past and overly bright enthusiasm about the future. I accepted her efforts with gentle restraint, unwilling to pretend everything was suddenly healed, but equally unwilling to reject her attempts outright. The birthday dinner itself went surprisingly well. The private room looked beautiful, the food was excellent, and the cake, a local specialty with wild Maine blueberries, was a hit. I made a brief appearance, toasted my mother sincerely, and then excused myself to allow the family celebration to continue without the complication of my presence. By Sunday afternoon, most of the extended family had departed, expressing confused but genuine pleasure at seeing me again and extracting promises to stay in better touch. I made no commitments I couldn't keep, but was warmer than I might have been before the weekend began. My parents, James and his family, and Ashley and her boyfriend were scheduled to leave Monday morning. I arranged a private breakfast for them in a small meeting room, intending to say my goodbyes and then return to my regularly scheduled property visits across the Northeast. I wasn't sure what to expect from this final interaction. Part of me anticipated a return to hostility once the public constraints of the weekend were removed. Another part hoped for genuine connection, though I tried to keep that hope realistic. What I didn't expect was to return to my sweet Sunday evening to find my mother sitting alone in the hallway outside my door. "Mom?" I asked, surprised. "Is everything okay?" She stood quickly, smoothing her slacks with nervous hands. I hoped we might talk. Just the two of us. I hesitated only briefly before unlocking my door and gesturing her inside. The suite was neat and impersonal. I had learned to travel light and leave minimal traces of my presence, even in my own hotels. "Would you like some tea?" I offered, moving to the small kitchenette. The suites at the Harborview included this amenity specifically for extended stay guests. "That would be nice, thank you." While I prepared 2 cups of tea, an herbal blend sourced from a local Maine farm as part of our commitment to regional partnerships, my mother sat perched on the edge of the sofa, looking around with interest. "Is this what all your hotels look like?" she asked. "Each property has its own character," I explained, bringing the tea to the sitting area. "But they all share certain elements: the focus on natural materials, local art, comfortable but elegant furnishings." She accepted the cup with a murmured thanks, then took a deep breath as if gathering courage. "I've made so many mistakes, Sophia." I sat across from her, neither confirming nor denying her statement. I.D. learned in business that sometimes the most powerful response was simply to create space for the other person to continue. "I've spent the weekend watching you," she continued. "The way you run this place, the way people respond to you. You're so confident and capable." She looked down at her tea. "I'm proud of you." I should have said that years ago. "I'm sorry I didn't." "Thank you," I said simply. She looked up, tears brimming. "That's it? Thank you?" I set my cup down carefully. "What would you like me to say, Mom? That it's okay? That the years of letting Dad and James tear down my dreams didn't hurt? That being excluded from your birthday celebration in my own hotel didn't sting?" She winced. "No, I don't expect you to say those things. I hope you know I always loved you, even when I failed to show it." "I believe that," I said softly. "I do. But love without action, without support, without standing up for someone can feel very hollow." My mother nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. "I was afraid of your father." "Not physically," she added quickly, seeing my expression. "But his disapproval, his anger. It was easier to go along, to keep the peace." "Easier for who?" I asked, though without rancor. "Not for me." "No," she acknowledged. "Not for you. For me. It was selfish." Her admission surprised me. I.D. expected defenses, justifications, perhaps even attempts to make me feel guilty for bringing up old hurts. This simple acknowledgement of her failure was unexpected and disarming. "Why no?" I asked. "Why this conversation tonight?" She set her tea down and clasped her hands together. "Because tomorrow we'll leave, and I don't know when I'll see you again." Because I've spent 60 years taking the easy path, and I don't want to waste whatever time I have left. Because you're my daughter, and I miss you. I miss the idea of having a mother, I admitted. But the reality is that we've been strangers for a long time. Can that change? She asked, her voice small but hopeful. I considered her question carefully, wanting to be honest, but not cruel. I don't know. Maybe. But not overnight, and not without real effort from both of us. What would that look like? For you? It was a good question, one that showed she was thinking beyond platitudes. I wasn't immediately sure of the answer, so I took my time, considering what a healthy relationship with my mother might actually involve. Regular communication, I said finally. Not just holiday calls or birthday texts. Real conversations about our lives. And honesty even when it's uncomfortable. No more pretending everything is fine when it isn't. I can do that, she said quickly, perhaps too quickly. And boundaries, I continued. I need you to respect that my business is mine. Not a family asset, not something Dad or James have any claim to or say in. She nodded. And your father? That's more complicated, I admitted. I don't know if he and I will ever have a good relationship. Too much has happened, and he's too invested in his version of reality. He's proud, she said. But he's also hurting. Retirement hasn't been easy for him. His identity was so wrapped up in his job, in being the provider. Seeing you succeed where he never did, it's difficult for him. I understand that, I said. But understanding doesn't obligate me to accept his treatment. His insecurity doesn't justify how he's treated me. No, it doesn't, she agreed, surprising me again. He needs to take responsibility for that himself. I'm not making excuses for him. I'm just trying to explain. We sat in silence for a moment, the tension between us not gone but somehow less jagged, less likely to wound if we moved carefully. Would you be open to having lunch when I'm in Boston next month? She asked eventually. Just us? The request was small, specific, manageable. I found myself nodding. I'd like that. She smiled, a genuine expression that reminded me suddenly of photos from her youth, before life and compromises had dulled her spirit. Thank you for the tea. And for listening. After she left, I stood at the window of my suite, looking out at the harbor where fishing boats and pleasure craft bobbed gently in the evening light. The conversation with my mother had been unexpected, unplanned, and yet possibly more meaningful than anything else that had happened during this strange homecoming. I thought about Monarch Hospitality, about the 35 properties now under my control, about the thousands of employees who depended on my leadership. I'd built something significant, something that mattered. I'd proven everyone who doubted me wrong. And yet, standing alone in my beautiful suite, I recognized that success meant nothing if it didn't connect to something deeper. The hotels, the brand I'd created, they were expressions of values I'd held since childhood: the importance of feeling welcomed, of being seen, of experiencing beauty and comfort in thoughtfully created spaces. At their core, these were deeply human values, rooted in connection. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd built an empire dedicated to making others feel welcome while feeling unwelcome in my own family. Perhaps that was the source of my drive all along, a determination to create for others what had been denied to me. Over the following months, my mother and I met for lunch as planned, then began a regular schedule of calls and occasional visits. Our relationship wasn't magically healed, but it was evolving into something new, something honest, if fragile. My father remained distant, though he no longer actively criticized my business in the few interactions we had. James eventually reached out with questions about hotel investment opportunities, which I politely but firmly redirected to my company's public investor relations department. Ashley surprised me by applying for a marketing position within Monarch Hospitality. I ensured her application received fair consideration, though no special treatment, and she eventually joined a regional team where her social media expertise proved valuable. The most unexpected development came 6 months after the fateful weekend at the Harborview. I launched a mentorship program for young people interested in hospitality careers, but lacking family support or financial resources. The Chrysalis Initiative, named after my first hotel, provided education, internships, and networking opportunities for promising students who, like my younger self, had dreams but limited means to achieve them. At the launch event in Boston, I was stunned to see my mother slip quietly into the back of the room. She didn't approach the podium or draw attention to herself, but when our eyes met across the crowded space, she gave me a small, proud smile and a nod that conveyed more than words could have. Later, as we shared a quiet dinner, she told me, "You've created something meaningful from your pain. That's rare and beautiful." Her words touched something deep within me. ID never sought my family's approval, not consciously, not since leaving home at 18. ID built Monarch hospitality for myself, to prove my own worth to myself. But hearing my mother acknowledge not just my success, but the deeper purpose behind it felt like a circle completing, a wound if not healed then at least beginning to scar over. The truth is, we don't get to choose our families. We can't control how they treat us or whether they support our dreams. What we can control is how we respond to that treatment, what we build from the raw materials of our experiences, and who we choose to become despite or because of our origins. I am Sophia Mitchell, owner of Monarch Hospitality, creator of spaces where people feel valued and welcome. My journey began in rejection, but blossomed into something far greater than mere revenge or vindication. It became a mission to transform the very industry my father had used to diminish me, to elevate it with the vision and values he had dismissed as impractical. Sometimes, the people who should believe in us the most are the ones who believe in us the least. Sometimes, the family we create through meaningful work and authentic connections proves more nurturing than the one we were born into. And sometimes, the most powerful response to being shut out is not to force your way back in, but to build something so magnificent that the world can't help but notice and perhaps, eventually, neither can those who once closed their doors to you. Have you ever had to prove yourself to someone who doubted you? How did that experience shape who you became? Share your story in the comments below. And if this journey resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear that rejection can be the beginning of something beautiful. Thank you for joining me today, and remember your worth isn't determined by those who fail to see it.